Hello.
Hey, hello.
Good
Good,
morning to you. It's
good
afternoon for me.
morning. Hello. Hi, Trevor. Hi, everybody. So we just went live, and we're just waiting a few seconds for some more people to turn in. Um,
Always good.
so yeah. So yeah, today's topic we're going to be talking. So these are our Hello Monday weekly lives. So we decided in 2022 to show up in our community, in our broader audience, to talk about developments in work, just informal chats. Like me and Trevor have been talking. We have been talking like this back and forth for almost 2 years about various topics. We've been following up on what's happening in the world and what we saw, what we learned from other people, and we decided to invite other people to join the conversation. LinkedIn Live is great for that because it allows us to get you involved, while we are still going to be able to structure and facilitate in a way that brings a lot of value to all the participants. So, how does it work? What we really would like you to do is to say hi and tell us where you're from so we know who is here, who joined us. Welcome. We know there's a little bit of a delay in the LinkedIn Live that we still also have to get used to. So we will see the LinkedIn, the comments popping up soon. Hi, Trevor.
We
How
should
are
do
you
the same,
today?
shouldn't we? We should do the
Yeah.
same thing, I think. So, and I also think it's what I quite like about it, because I think it's very on topic, is that I'm dialing in. Last time I was from my co working space. Today I'm dialing in from my kitchen. In front of quite a famous clock. It's been on TV with when my wife was interviewed, and anyone who's ever worked with me has seen that clock because it's my best space to sit and work. And I'm in Kent, in the south of England. And so this is just, this is one of my many spaces in which I work, but it's one of the ones that is kind of nearest to a coffee and also food and things like that. So I like being here quite a bit. I think you
Yeah.
should say where you are as well, Angelique.
Well, I have been based in Brazil, Bahia, for the last year and a half, like yeah, full time. I have a house in the city in Salvador where I used to go to co-working spaces as well. But these days I am at the beach, so I'm in a chalet at the almost beachfront, enjoying a little bit of the sun. There's still the last days of summer. We had carnival. We had carnival that wasn't carnival, but it was carnival.
Mm.
So I'm taking a little bit of a break from the city and the busyness, and just enjoying nature as this technology allows us to do nowadays.
And it's always gutting when I talk to you because, well, particularly over winter, when it's over winter and I'm freezing cold and I'm wearing a jumper and stuff like that, and then you're talking to me from like a sunny beach, I always feel slightly gutted that I've got the worst end of this deal. It's nice to be talking in a transatlantic way, but I definitely feel like I've got the worst end of that particular thing.
Mhm. Yeah. So today's topic that we want to talk about, and we really want to ask you all to participate, because it is something that we don't like. We're very curious, might as curious as everybody is joining today to know what will be happening. We have, of course, some ideas. We have some developments that already were in the past, and that we can for sure predict that will be still going on in the future. But we're very curious to hear from everybody else what we're thinking. We've got some ideas that we are sharing with you. But for now, please let us know, uh, what do you want to talk about? Whether you want us to address, or what are your predictions? What do you think is the main development is going to happen in 2022, or maybe a little bit later in 2023? So
Yeah, and I think there's probably worth putting some caveats in there, isn't it? Because let's face it, the last 2 years have not really panned out how anyone would have predicted. And I can't remember, someone famous said like only an idiot predicts or something like that. So we're going to be slightly cautious with our predictions, but there are a few things that I think, just because we work with organisations that are really trying to embrace the future of work, we're seeing some things that maybe other organizations aren't thinking about yet. So those are the kind of things where we can kind of safely say some organizations are doing this and you might want to do it in the near future.
mhm.
And that, I think, is like the safe side of predictions, the non-idiot side of predictions.
Yeah, and I think the predictions that are already happening, that we can also have an academic base, that we can see
Yeah,
that are also making a lot of sense. It's basically the foundation of the work with Hello Monday Club, is also seeing what is the most optimized organizational context for mainly technology and innovative companies, and then we
mm,
can know that one way or another, if if that is optimized or most effective, that companies will find their way there.
yeah,
It might take a little bit, maybe going to the left, maybe going to the right, but they will find their way in the end. So we can also help our companies and our audience to have a little bit of a shortcut to go to that most optimized space without doing too much going off track. But Trevor,
yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit. Elaborate on today's topic, predictions for the workplace for 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, so I think, our starting point when we were discussing this before, and the kind of themes that have come up, they are all really with this idea that we're sort of getting to the end of the pandemic. And I'm currently trying to compile as much as I possibly can for a book that I'm writing that effectively describes, okay, so as the pandemic starts to fade into the background, rightly or wrongly, and you may have different views on that, but as it starts to directly influence how we operate at work differently, we're going to see a distinct shift. And that shift is not the same as the lockdown style working from home or the broad government policy style working from home. This shift will take a while. And I can't
Mhm.
sometimes describe it as the bungee rope, because what's happened is people have had to work from home and they've been sort of stuck and they haven't had a good experience of working from home if they haven't worked from home previously, or they're kind of experimenting with remote. And then all of a sudden, companies are opening their offices back up and people are really hankering, or there's a lot of pressure from companies to go back in. And I think that is now stretching the elastic the other way. And then I think what's going to happen is we're going to get another spring back, which is when people are going, all right, well, I'm back in the office now. I kind of remember what it's like. I remember the pros and the cons, and I was maybe looking through rose tinted glasses. So now what? And I think virtually all the predictions that we've been talking about really come from that now what point of view. And there's been a shift in the power in who gets to decide that. I think there's been a shift in demand. And what I mean by that is people have got a different view as to what it is that they want. And we've seen loads of posts on LinkedIn, and we've spoken to clients as well about them wanting to maintain and keep things from lockdown. But that's not the same as now the world has been opened up. And I don't mean post pandemic, just in terms of people's mindset. What are they actually going to ask for now? And so I think, though all those things lead us into our next trends. But I mean, I'm interested to see what other people think, and interested to see on your take on that as well, Angelique.
Yeah, I think I predicted in the beginning of the pandemic that employees' needs would be changing, because like I've been working remotely and location independent for many years, and I know that it will change your mindset around work and the place it has in our lives.
Mm,
And once you start going down that road, you start to, at first it's like, oh, it's really nice that I can have some lunch at home and spend some time with my family and I don't have to commute. But that development will go on. It will be like, okay, it's nice, I can take a nap, and maybe I can shift my working structure and do more exercise in the day, and there's opening up like some and like there's a class or some training that is happening here that's in the daytime. So I think that development of shifting those needs, as you say, people at first, now there might be a drive going back to the office because we miss the social structures, we miss the daily structures, and then that will start conflicting with what they experienced with during, like, the advantages that they experienced during the
yeah,
pandemic. And then that needs to kind of figure itself out. And interestingly enough, that will collide with organizations figuring out how those new working structures will look like. And I think there might be some potential conflicts happening. I
yeah,
am looking in I'm looking in organizations where we hear a lot that managers or teams are going to be deciding themselves about what hybrid means, how they're going to be collaborate, how often people need to go to the office. And in itself, that's not a bad decision. But with those, there is a new context that opened up, and there is this changing needs and a lot of individuals that have different ideas, varying from people that cannot go wait to go back to the office and think that work should be done by default together, and people that were
Yeah.
like, okay, I never want to go back. I want to travel the world and work remotely fully. So there is like a lot on that spectrum, and that is for now, I think, figuring that out. I can see that also with my clients and the companies and our members, that is really
Yeah.
the question that people have. So what do you think about that? Could it lead
I
us
think, yeah, I mean, I think one of the differentiators here is going to be which organizations have learnt to deal well with complexity. So if you are an organization that has sussed out that when something becomes incredibly complex, you can't always decide it centrally and you have to empower your workforce, I think those guys are going to navigate this with less pain and less conflict. I think and unfortunately I have seen this a lot, even in companies that look from the outside or even purport to be quite progressive, you've got organizations where they go, we will find the right way. We will find the one right way to do this. We will decide that it's 2 days in work. We will decide that, you've got these core hours or whatever. And they try and do it across the organization. And the slightly smarter ones tend to group it by job type or job family, which is still like managing complexity, but probably trying still to manage it too much. And I think that's going to be the point of conflict. Those organizations that have sussed that if you empower people, if you empower managers or even empower individuals, and you give them as much autonomy as possible, and this popped up as a bit of a theme last time, but I think this is how all organizations are going to have to shift, and some will be better than others. If you've worked that out, that empowerment is the key, and that you just have to put a few lines in the sand. So I'm thinking things like managing by outcomes, or really clear, simple rules for the organization around how they operate. Like those things will allow people to make decisions for themselves. And by the way, as an organizational consultant, leadership expert, we've been talking about this for years when we say, oh, if you give people the values, they'll know how to behave. But then what most organizations do is they also then have micromanagement and they have very clear direction from everyone. And so the values go by the wayside, not because the values weren't good, which is often the thing that's blamed, but because people had so many other things to think about, they couldn't also think about the values. So I'm not saying values are the answer here, but that same principle of give people the information they need to make their own decisions about how they work and when they work and what it is they're supposed to achieve, leave them be, and that will start to determine more what the right way of doing it is. So the conflict will be in those companies who aren't able to embrace some version of that.
Exactly. And I want to add to that about empowerment, it's one of the things that I've been talking about a lot, because in my
Yeah.
own academic research, master thesis, I found that autonomy really, really is the key. It is the most effective management style for innovative knowledge workers is when you give autonomy to your employees. There, you need to create a little bit more context. What I'll do is I'll post a link to the summary to the summary of that research for
Yeah,
people
good idea.
interested to download it. It's really interesting it's not a hard read, but it gives you really a lot of valuable information on that. So just in 1 minute I will just post that. So what else, like I heard you say something really interesting. Yeah, I wanted to elaborate a little bit on that, because you said about potential conflicts. I think where it comes down to is that people have office first or a remote first mindset. Very, very shortly, an office first mindset is the idea that work takes place in the office. It should be take place in the office, collaboration, engagement, culture. And you determine by exception, you give exceptions for things that can be done away from the office.
Yeah.
That could potentially lead to a lot of conflict, because there is always it's basically a minefield where you're going to be heading to. People are going to say, well, we can definitely do this one-on-one online, because I have some plans to go away for the weekend. While the manager said, well, I think it's important for our our communication and engagement that we do this like in a physical space. So that could
Yeah.
on a daily basis lead to potential conflicts. if you say, well, there is a remote first mindset, which basically means that you move towards that everything is possible to do in a virtual mindset. But if desired, you can come to an office space or meet somewhere else in a room to whatever, do a workshop or training, or something that you really really feel like, and that you determine in that idea of results driven workplace that connects people
Yeah.
with value, where you
Yeah.
will diminish that potential conflict a lot, because we can companies are going to be so much more flexible, and they're able to meet the needs of their employees in a very different and a very more agile way. So I think that is the key to a more solution. And that leads, of course, to I think that leads to some other interesting development as well. So we've been talking a lot about new working structures, like the 9 to 5,
Yeah.
5 days a week. Do you think that has been? Do we think that that is ending soon? I've been asking a lot of people that question.
I mean, I feel like the you've got these business leaders, maybe in quite traditional businesses, pride themselves on being super rational, and yet the degree to which we are stuck in this idea of 9 to 5, 5 days a week is amazing. And so even with organizations that are saying things like, oh, we do flexible working, a lot of the time what that means is you have to put in a flexible working request. So I think this still goes back to that overarching theme of the kind of elastic band and this idea that we need to kind of stretch back in or contract back in, I suppose, which is that at the moment people are just playing with one idea mostly. They're mostly playing with, where do I work? And as that starts to settle, they'll then start to play a little bit more with, how do I work? And they've already done it in this exceptional circumstance. And what's happening is they're kind of trying to, I mean, we heard this from one of our clients, and I have this as well. I'm negotiating with my wife constantly, like, where are we going to be and what are we going to do and what are the logistics around that? And I just think that
Mhm.
people are going to start to realize that if their employer gives a little bit, it takes a lot of stress out of their life in managing the logistics in your life. So I just think it's less structure overall, certainly around working hours, more structure maybe in how people communicate within teams, but less structure overall. And I think it will be very gradual, but we will see a move away from 9 to 5, 5 days a week. I think that has got to shift. And we also know that there are a number of concurrent experiments, certainly across Europe and also in the US, looking at a 4-day work week, which you and I have got kind of slightly different views on, but we both kind of agree that it's too prescriptive to say a 4-day work week. But at least it's cracking open that particular idea and just testing it a little bit.
We will be talking about that next week.
Okay, I'll
I
keep quiet then.
have a week. I haven't published it yet, so people, please keep an eye out on the page and connect with me and Trevor on. Connect with me and Trevor. You can find us easily on. You can find us easily on LinkedIn. Connect with us to be invited. We'll also send you the recording here with some more information for next week's. But it includes information about next week's event as well. But the 4-day work week is an interesting topic. It's a hot topic, and I think it's important to discuss that. So we won't go in that today.
No, not
I do
today.
agree with what you say. I do agree what you say, that we have been. There is still a perspective way, and if we look at empowerment and we look at meeting needs, then having a predefined working structure is not necessarily where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking on this idea. Also, what it all needs is a more asynchronous way of working. So some people ask me what it is. So I wanted to invite you, Trevor, to, before we move on. Actually, I
But they
do
asked
want,
you, so
sorry, I want people to put in the comments. Please, people put in the comments. Do you think we're gonna go to moving away from the 9 to 5 work week and the 4-day work week, and what do you think about it? Because we'll take that into next topic, and that connects to
mm.
asynchronous working. What exactly, Trevor?
Yeah. So I think this comes back to the same topic, sort of, which is that we're going to have this sort of back and forth, because I've seen organizations that really embraced asynchronous working when everyone was forced to work remotely.
Mhm.
And they are bringing a lot of that back into the workplace. I also saw people who just then filled the diary with meetings, and that was how work got done. And everyone was feeling very stressed. And you published some research about how people are having quite a bit more meetings, and they're also receiving more emails. And so there seems to again be this slight divide. I'm sure it's not as dramatic as I think it is, but this divide amongst organisations who've really embraced this and got it right. And have supported it with training and education, because you need that, because people can't just instantly go to asynchronous working. And then organizations that never really got a handle on it were treading water for 2 years. And now they go back in the workplace, they haven't really got a handle on it. And that's going to impact the degree to which you can break up some of these working structures. Because if 90%, actually no one does that, if 50% of my work is only done synchronously, then I'm going to really struggle to adapt to my working hours. And especially when you take on board the idea of like the global economy, we know that if organizations get really smart and start to create teams that go across the globe rather than sticking them in very particular locations and geographies, they can really leverage people working at various different hours, because all of a sudden you have a kind of seamless sort of follow the sun solution, which organizations have been doing for a long time, don't get me wrong, but they would then still divide the teams up, and they'd have these handovers between teams rather than this idea of a global team.
Yeah. Well, I think it's indeed asynchronous. I spoke to someone during pandemic who told me they had this is my 52nd meeting. I was in a Zoom meeting with him, or a Teams meeting, and he was like, this is my 52nd meeting this week. I was like, I can't believe that.
No.
It's just, people are doing so much async as a default mindset. We have to hop on a call. We have to, discuss this together. And this is why we need to be all online between 9 to 5. And because it's so busy, that is actually extending between 7 to 7. And that has been, especially during pandemic, we've seen also increased in burnouts. That has led to a lot of people rethinking their workplace. So that great resignation in combination with this more distributed way of working has led to a lot of retention. We have seen HR directors that are in charge of the employee experience working 13 hours a day themselves, trying to keep up. And yeah, I think it's one of the biggest things that companies will, or at least should be learning, is to go to asynchronous working, where you will allowing more agility, more freedom. And there is so much technology out there that allows you to do that. And
Yeah.
that is one of the predictions as well, is that companies will start to embracing those new technologies, and also looking at new skills, because it requires some new way of thinking around work, and some new skills. So these are
Yeah, it does.
definitely this is definitely what I see for 2022, and beyond that on the horizon.
Well, I mean, what we saw in the first stage of the pandemic, and unfortunately, when we look into the next couple of years, we're still talking about what does it mean to move out of a pandemic. We saw in the first stage of that, companies like Zoom and Microsoft innovate incredibly quickly across the existing
Mhm.
platforms to allow people to work in very different ways. What we didn't see as much of, although there was grassroots of it, was the startups that had solutions that were perfectly geared towards, global teams or remote working, or working in a third space and things like that. Those teams, those companies rather, that were doing the kind of startup stuff, they should have blown up. I mean, some of them did, but a lot of them, they didn't get the traction they needed. And I think that's because people were juggling, and they were so intent on just
Mhm.
trying to get work done in the same way as they had done before, that as more organizations recognize, they identify a problem, it should really be a performance problem. We want to work asynchronously, but we're having trouble communicating this way, or we are not we're not really embracing our different global locations, and we've got replication of management structures in various different locations. When they realize that there are solutions out there for their communication needs, for the logistics needs, all that kind of stuff, I think those companies will grow substantially. The ones that kind of break through in the market will really grow substantially, and they'll help to make a big difference. And
Mhm.
I get very excited. So I'm slightly biased. I get very excited about new technologies, particularly when they appear to solve a problem. The issue with all of this stuff is mindset. If you've got a mindset that we're back in the office and it's back to the usual, then you're not going to embrace these. And that comes back to, it's not really a prediction, but it's more an observation that over the long term, traditional companies will get outcompeted by less traditional companies who are embracing all of these technological advances. The traditional companies, small chunks of what they already do, they'll get outcompeted on, and then they'll start to follow suit because it will hit them where it hurts, which is, in the wallet.
I think there will be generations, persons. Some people are more embracing a remote mindset than others. Some people, there is a younger generation that is entering, already, that has been taking advantage, adopting more quickly. There will be leadership bias in people in leadership positions with for a lot of the times, a different mindset around work because of just the position that they're in and their own careers and developments. And it goes a lot also. This is gonna be touching on values. It's gonna be touching on things that we learned, the factory mindset that is still a default mindset. And I can see that, I can foresee that there will be a lot of still a lot of employees also say, well, they tell me I have to be in the office for 3 days a week and there's no rationale. And it doesn't really matter because I'm sitting there and I'm still doing my virtual work, and I just want to be more flexible. So I'm finding this fully remote distributed job like in a very different country even. And so I think there will be a great shifting of a great shifting both in companies where there will be a lot of experimenting for what is actually going to be working for us. So that is within on team level, on organization level, but there will also be a group of people saying, well, this is not the way I actually want to work. And because it is it's going to be employee driven, more employee driven than it was ever before. We have to take into account as organizations that there will be a lot of shifting in your employee, just the workforce itself, individuals who leave.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think the great resignation is a bit of a
How do you think,
stunt,
Trevor, is the best way for companies?
I'm sorry. I missed that question, Angelique. You're going to have to say it again. You've got a delay, Angelique, or it might be my end. So I'm going to try and answer the question I thought you were going to ask. I was going to say that I think there's the external environment outside of organizations, there's a shift towards employee power and the power of talent. So and this has been happening for a while anyway. But I think what we've recognized is, and this is part of the great resignation that I was going to say, is that really, are those people resigning, or are they going to do independent work? Well, in that case, organizations need to be able to leverage using independence more effectively, rather than just using independent consultants or freelancers on the fringe. They very much need to become more of the workforce planning. And that's why you saw a lot of regulation coming in Europe last year to try and stop organizations abusing that. So you'll have more people choosing portfolio careers, and organizations that are able to embrace that will have access to the best talent. And at the moment, there's still very much a view that when you have a talent gap, you ask, how am I going to employ someone to fill that? And I think that's the wrong question to ask. I think you should say, what is the best way to access the skills and talent that fill that gap, which could be a mixture of, I can employ someone, bearing in mind that I don't want to start assuming that it's always going to be a full-time person. I can find someone who is more freelance. I think that's a big part of that experimentation, is identifying people want to have portfolio careers. They're sometimes more talented people because they're really confident, they've got lots of experience, they've got niche things, they're going to want to access that. So I think organizations that manage that will be doing the best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm thinking that's it's quite we chose to have a quite practical approach about what is going to be what is actually going to be the predictions in the workplace. We base this on, there's obviously a lot more going on in the world of work that we can identify as trends, but we were focusing on the things that we heard from our clients, our members, our audience, people that reach out to us with questions. but how do we actually start to manage? So we wanted to touch on some of those topics. Um, that is also still a little bit of an overview, but we will be addressing those topics over the next months in our weekly Hello Monday Club lives. We also have a weekly article that we post on our magazine. You can subscribe to that. You can find it on our Hello Monday weekly on LinkedIn, or you can subscribe on our website. All those topics are going to be addressed. What we really like you to do, and also if you see the review of this, please post your comments, your predictions, your questions, your challenges in the comments. Keep on doing that, because we always keep an eye out for them, and we will address also the comments and the questions from the people that are joining us, because it is something we are all on this journey together. We are shaping the future of work, not just for this year, for 2022, but for the next years and even for the next generation. And it's an exciting time, but it's also good. It's a high responsibility, a big responsibility. And I think it's very important that we make the right decisions, and creating this collective intelligence bubble is just a great way to help us through this period. So yeah, thank you. I think we are like in our uh, outside our time frame already. So
We
some
always do
last words.
that, and that's fine.
Yeah, this is fine. So Trevor, so do you have some last words?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a leader or if you're in HR, I genuinely, from my heart, wish you good luck, because I think um, keeping up with your employees and their needs and demands over the next year or so is going to be really challenging. So, my heart goes out to anyone who is kind of listening to all these conflicting voices in their head and have to manage that as part of their role. So, just recognize that a lot of people are in the same space, a lot of people are muddling through, and that's genuinely okay. And good luck from me.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So we hope to see you all next week. We will send you the recording if you sign up for the weekly event. And we hope to see you there, connect with you. Have a great day, have a great weekend, and see you all next week. Bye.
Yeah,
Thank
take care,
you.
everyone. Bye bye.